Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin. If you enjoyed the information in this video, please do like and subscribe. It really does help me out. Now let's dive right in. As usual, I want to start with a crypto fear and greed index just so we can get a general sense on where the market is at today. As we can see, we're still sitting in fear, so not much has changed. There's a general sense of fear in the market. I think some of this is attributed to some of the weaker price action on the Bitcoin price, as well as some more bearish signals and weakness overall being shown throughout the crypto market. In addition, I think we're seeing, if we go down to a lower time frame, you can see if we're looking at Bitcoin price, we see a massive move up, and now it's essentially been forming lower highs and lower lows over the past several months, which is starting to worry more people. In addition, not to get political on the channel, but I think from what it seems, Donald Trump is viewed as more of the pro-crypto candidate. And recently, with Kamala Harris surging in the polls, I think people are getting a little bit more nervous about Donald Trump's election chances. And if Kamala were to win, I think many people in the crypto market are viewing this as a potentially bearish event. So anyway, I think that's a lot of the reason for the sustained level of fear that we're seeing. But as I went over in the video yesterday, we can see that most of the market is spent in either extreme fear, or neutral. So this is something that I wouldn't say is super either concerning or unusual. So moving on, I wanted to go over some Google Trends and discuss what we have seen in the past about what we would consider a fairly easy retail involvement metric. Blue is Bitcoin, yellow is Ethereum, and then red is Solana. We can see that the peaks were quite high in the peak of 2021 in that bull market. We can see there started to be some retail interest coming back in kind of the early to mid March timeframe, but that has essentially kind of died off at this point. So at least from what we can see right now, the retail involvement doesn't really seem to be here yet. So if we're to see some of these highs that we've seen in some of these last cycles, we would imagine this Google search trend to probably come back up here soon, which we've not seen yet. So that's just something to keep an eye on, and we'll probably be returning back to it a couple times on the channel. Additionally, we're going to go and look over Bitcoin futures open interest. This is kind of an interesting metric to keep track of, because this is essentially the level of interest based on the future price of Bitcoin. So what we can see is kind of the level of interest as in coordination with the price. So as we can see, usually as the Bitcoin price is lower, we can see that there's usually a smaller level of open interest in futures. So we can see down in some of the depths of the bear market, we're sitting kind of around 9 or 10 billion. Now, if we go over to more current numbers, at peaks we were seeing almost 40 billion of open interest in some of these peaks, which is obviously a massive increase over the lows of around 9 or 10. Right now, we're sitting currently at about 30 billion. So, obviously the open interest for these futures is still very, very high, but they have pulled back at least a little bit from some of the peaks that we've seen. But overall, this is still showing a lot of interest from more professional traders and people who are trying to bet on the futures prices of crypto. So this, I would say, is something overall pretty good to see. And I would imagine if we just look at the historical trend, maybe this will come down a little bit, but over time, we are seeing a pretty aggressive uptrend. So I would imagine that this continues to rise. Moving on, I wanted to go over the Bitcoin halving progress. So this chart is a little interesting in that it shows in these green highlighted fields, we can see how far we are past the halving in each cycle. So as we can see, the first cycle isn't really super relevant. So we'll be looking at the second, third, fourth, and then now the fifth halving that we're on now. So as we could see through the second halving, there was already a pretty aggressive move up in price at this point. However, we had not seen anywhere close to the highs of that halving cycle. So promising information here in the sense that pretty much at every point, the lows are far yet to come. So this second halving cycle was almost a little bit of an aberration in the sense that it moved up, I think, far more quickly than what we've seen in some of the other halvings. But then after the pullback, it did shoot up again as well. So the third and fourth halving, I think, are a little bit more comparable to what we've seen going on in our current halving cycle. I would say the only difference that have seen in this current halving cycle is the prices definitely dip very low, and then they don't really start to come back up until after the halving, which usually comes anywhere between about a year to 18 months after the halving. Something that was a little bit interesting with this halving cycle is that we saw the prices come back fairly dramatically, but we actually broke a new all-time high before the halving, which had never happened before. So I think this is a little bit of an interesting cycle, and as you can see, we're actually showing a bit more of a pullback than what we'd seen in the past. In the past, everything kind of just sat relatively flat overall, maybe a little bit of increase. But now what we're seeing is we're seeing a little bit of a pullback, and I think some of this could be attributed to the new all-time highs that we'd seen prior to the halving. One thing I do think we can see pretty clearly in the chart, though, is in all historical halving cycles, we're not even close to the new highs, I should say, that were made in that halving cycle. So I do think we can see some more room to run here. And I do have another chart at the end of this video that I do think might show some pretty interesting information and pretty exciting information if you are invested into Bitcoin. So if you are interested in seeing that, stick around till the end of the video because I think you might like what you see. Next, I want to go to the stock to flow model. This, as I mentioned in previous videos, is a model that essentially compares the price of Bitcoin to the price of what a commodity, if we were to view Bitcoin as a commodity, what the price would be at that current point in time. So as we can see right now, the stock to flow valuation would be somewhere around 85,000. This is below what the current market price is of Bitcoin. So as we can see, we're sitting below that stock to flow kind of trend line here. But what we've seen in the past is during previous all-time highs, it's always gone above that model, and it's actually always gone above by a pretty decent amount, almost 2 times here. It looks like about 4 times here. And then here it was like 5 or 6 times. Even on this one, while the highs have gone lower above the trend line, they still have gone above it. And what we're seeing here is depending on, where we sit on this stock to flow trend line, we're seeing anywhere between, potentially 130 up to, $440,000, which, I think for all of us, maybe that seems a little bit unattainable, but that would be, obviously very great for everybody involved in Bitcoin. So moving on, kind of sitting in confluence with that previous model, we can see the Bitcoin rainbow chart. The Bitcoin rainbow chart has, as you can see, historically been a pretty consistent indicator of kind of where the price of Bitcoin is at. And we can see, based on, red down all the way to like dark blue, where we're at in terms of buying. And if you can look in terms of history, when we saw the lows of last cycle, Bitcoin actually dropped out of like the fire sale territory. And then if we look in, like the 2017, Bitcoin was well up into the maximum bubble territory. So if you were to only buy and sell Bitcoin based on using this indicator, you probably would have done relatively well in the past. Obviously not waiting for maximum bubble territory every time, but maybe waiting for, kind of the light orange area, which is kind of this band right here. Every previous cycle, Bitcoin has hit into this, is it a bubble, and even into the FOMO intensifies levels. So this is something that, is worth looking into the future. But what we can see here is we are currently sitting in the buy territory, just barely above the fire sale territory right now. So if we were to see this, again, if we were to go out a little bit, middle of September, we can see, kind of the price targets here for what Bitcoin would look like. 177,000 would be in the hold, 243 is it a bubble, 335 FOMO intensifies, all the way up to, a potential of $613,000, which would be, maximum bubble territory. I think if we can all agree, if we were to get to some level of this is something where I think there would have to be external factors, that would drive Bitcoin into this valuation. If the US dollar starts to hyperinflate, people go to scarce assets in order to maintain the value of their purchasing power, essentially. Historically, that's been commodities, real estate, gold, silver, Bitcoin, I think could be one that is being adopted into that as well. So something to consider. The rainbow price chart has always, at least historically, been relatively accurate. So, if we're to use it as an indicator of the future, we definitely have a lot of room to run in this next cycle. So it'll be interesting to see, if it can continue to hold this cycle, and if so, where we end up on the rainbow. The last chart that I want to show you guys, this is one that I think a lot of people will be excited about, and this is one that is called the Bitcoin cycle repeat chart. And what this does is this essentially, it looks back, I want to say it's like 1,400 days roughly, and it uses essentially the average of the previous cycle movements to determine an essentially future forecast where we should be going in this cycle. So as we can see right now, we can see that, we're about 60,000. And from here, this is going to essentially predict where we're moving soon. If history is to be, used as a teacher, we would see, a pretty quick and aggressive run up towards, the end of this year. The end of this year, we're seeing a $237,000 Bitcoin, which I think a lot of people would be very happy with, up all the way until, the local peaks here of about 371,000 in about mid to late March of 2025. After that, we'd see another local peak of about 394 in about October of 2025. And then we go all the way up. Again, this is following what we saw a little bit in this cycle of essentially the new all-time high being broken right before the halving. And if we were to do that again, we'd be seeing a top of $426,000, almost $427,000 per Bitcoin, which, I think if we saw that, that's a pretty nice ROI that we'd be seeing at that point, which would look, really, really nice. And I think a lot of us would be very happy with that. So anyway, obviously this is not, looking into the future. This is not investment advice. There's no guarantees that this could happen. All this is doing is essentially mapping the movements of the previous cycle onto the future cycle, increasing in magnitude based on past performance. And this is roughly what it would look like. So I figured it'd be interesting to show you guys and get your opinions on what you think here. So this is something that we'll definitely monitor as the cycle continues. And we'll see if we start to see this massive run up, towards the end of the year, beginning of next year. If so, I think that would be, really exciting for a lot of us, but, only the future can tell. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please do leave me a like and subscribe. It is really helpful. Also, please feel free to drop me a comment. I love reading your guys' feedback on what your thoughts are about the videos, and if there's anything else you want me to cover as well, I'd be happy to start making some videos revolving things that you guys might be interested in as well. Anyway, thank you for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.